Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Generic Garage. I just got laid off. Yeah. Definitely not the way I wanted to start this episode, but yeah, I love the company that I work for, and I wish them the very best in their future endeavors. I am currently looking for a job, and hopefully by the end of this episode, I have found a job. And if not, well, we might be slowing down on the project a little bit. So yeah, I'm still kind of processing all that. But for now, I figured the best thing to do would be to distract myself with some work on the Shogun. So in today's episode, the wheels showed up. They're currently sitting in the car. So what I want to do before I take the rims up to Discount Tire and get rubber put on them is I want to take the rims out of the Shogun and make sure they fit on the car. Everything that I looked at in terms of modeling and CAD design and references and 3D scanning says that everything should work out just fine, but I want to be very sure before I go spending $1,000 on rubber for these rims. The tires have actually already been paid for. I just haven't gotten them installed on the rims, and I can cancel that order in case anything goes wrong. And financially speaking, it might be better for me to do that, but I think I'm gonna be okay. I'm probably gonna find a job pretty quickly. I have experience in construction, data analytics, aerospace, mechanical design. Like, I'm a pretty dang good jack of all trades. Clearly, I'm somewhat decent at working on cars. So I think everything's gonna work out just fine. So let's take these rims out of the boxes, see what they look like, and put them on the car and make sure everything fits. And then we gotta get over to Discount Tire for an appointment here in just a little bit to get the tires put on them, and then maybe we'll drive home with the wheels on the car or not. Not too sure. Well, the wheel does fit on here and it does spin, so that means we do have some clearance between the face of the rim and the shock, and nothing's going to bind up, but it's a little less clearance than I initially thought. The CAD model and the scan data and the design of the wheel says that I should have about 2 to 3 millimeters of clearance between the face of the rim and that shock. But when I take a 0.43 and a 0.48 millimeter gauge and I stack them up and I put them back in here, that is a relatively tight fit. So I'm thinking I have about 0.8 millimeters of clearance between the outside face of the rim and the shock. Now, that should technically be enough. I don't think I could ever exert quite as much force as would be needed to bend the rim enough to actually force it to contact the shock, but it's still a little bit less than I had anticipated. So now I need to think about the clearance between the tire and everything else. And the good news is that as the shock travels upward, it's also leaned inwards, so I gain more clearance away from the side of the rim as the shock goes up. So now I need to just think about the tire. This rim is a 17-inch rim, and the outside diameter of this biggest face here is 18.5 inches. So that means that my 255 R4017, which is a 25-inch outside diameter max, would leave us about 3¼ inches all the way around this for the tire profile. And if I take a square and I butt it up against the shock here, I can see that the height of the base of the spring is at about 3.5 inches. And this makes a difference because the diameters of the different components on here actually get larger. So even though I'm gaining more space as I go up, I am losing space because the diameters of things are getting bigger as it goes up. The limiting factor here is going to be the base of the spring, which is again 3.5 inches away from the outermost diameter of the rim, and the tire is only going to go up to about 3.25 inches. Now a 255 R4017, that 255 part means 255 millimeters, and 255 millimeters is barely over 10 inches. It's like 10.03 inches. So on a 10-inch wide rim, the side profile or the side of the tire should not stick out past the face of this rim. If anything, it's going to appear just slightly stretched. And as you can see back here on this tire, the profile is not perfectly square. Of course, it's going to round in at the top of the tire. So we should have enough clearance between the tire and that spring. But worst case scenario, if we get up to discount tire and we put all of the wheels on the car and we hear rubbing between the tire or the rim and the shocks or anything like that, we take it all back off, we leave it there. I put the other rims back on this car, drive it home, grab the truck, go back over there and pick everything up. And then we jump on the computer and we design a little hub-centric spacer, and we send it over to SendCutSend and we tell them, please cut this out of 2mm thick metal, very thin metal, and we use that as a spacer to space the wheels out a little bit more and gain us some more clearance. I don't think that 1mm and 2mm hub-centric spacers exist, but with SendCutSend, they can exist. And we won't be stuck with your typical 5 and 10mm wheel spacers that are on the market. So let's move on to checking the front. Alrighty, well, the front wheel is on here and things are looking better as far as the clearance between the shock and the face of the rim. So tons of clearance in there. Don't think we're gonna have to worry about that at all. I wish the backs were kind of like that, but I think the place that we're going to run into our issue is going to be the tire rubbing the fender here, in there, up there, and probably over here on the bumper. Again, we're running an 18.5 inch outside diameter rim here. The fronts are only going to be about 23.8 or 24 inches in diameter. So splitting the difference, we're looking somewhere around 2.5 to 2 5/8 inches on that height of the tire. And as we turn the wheel here, we lose a lot of clearance in there. And if I take a tape measure here, we only have about 2 inches of clearance there. So I'm pretty dang sure that we're gonna start rubbing the tire pretty much everywhere on this fender. Not sure how to get around that for right now. Before we take off to discount, I did forget to mention that I did make some new door cards, and I got some speakers installed. Those are little, 5.5 inch speakers in the doors. I still need to wrap all this in marine grade vinyl, but here's a couple of pictures of the process of doing all of that. Aside from that, there is now a little 400 watt TA ramps, TA ramps, however you want to pronounce it, from Amazon, running from the unit that's powering all the speakers and everything now. That's a pretty cool little unit. So the music got a little bit better in here, and we should be set up and ready to go for anything that I want to put in the back, and then I'll have to do another amp for the subwoofers in the future. You can see that the wheels are no longer in the Shogun. We both kind of agreed that it'd be best to not put the wheels on the car. We're gonna go hop in the Ranger and drive back up to discount, and we'll see how long it takes them to get those tires mounted. Good news, everyone. I did find a job. It took me 4 days, but I went to a job hiring event at Boeing, and now I'm going to be working on aircraft. So thank God for that. However, it did come with about a 35% pay cut. So in the off time after work, I've been door dashing to try to make up extra money. And that seems to be going all right so far. And I'm still looking for other avenues to bring in more income. So for now, the project has slowed down a little bit, but you see behind me, there's some 3D printing that's been going on. So let's take a look at that real quick and I'll show you what's up. It all starts with a 3D scan of the Festiva. You can see all the little dots represented on the model here for the reflective dots that get put on the car. And then I section it up into 4 different sections. So we have our front driver side, our front passenger, our rear driver, and our rear passenger. And I wanted to focus primarily on the front and the rear passenger side, because when I got around to the other side of the scan, as is common with large objects, the model started having issues lining up. But the car should be a mirror from left to right, so anything that I do on one side should be easily copied over to the other side. So then I jumped on YouTube and hit up Learn Everything About Design, and he does a fantastic job of showing you how to work with 3D scans and develop everything in mesh models and then thicken it and get it exported for 3D printing. So my first attempt here was for the front passenger side, and this is what the model ended up looking like. It actually took me about 40 hours to get this modeled, and there was a heck of a lot of learning involved in this, but it came out looking great. Once I have this, I take it and I export it over to Blender, and then I thicken it over there, because thickening this kind of shape inside of Fusion seems to have some issues, but it works over in Blender. And then I bring it back over here. I create a solid body out of it. I convert it into a solid body, and then I section it up into sections that are small enough to fit inside the 3D printer. So there's what that looks like for the front fender, and then I got to work on the rear fender here, and there is the first mock-up of that. I printed some prototypes out of PLA, and I'll show you here in just a second. I am not going to use PLA for this. I am definitely going to use PETG. I've considered many other materials, but as far as cost goes, I think PETG is going to win. And if you follow a YouTube channel called Ding Dong Drift, he does everything out of PETG, then he epoxies the outside, and then he carbon fiber reinforces the inside and gets it all sanded down, and then high build primer and paints it, and it actually comes out looking really good and really clean, and it's strong because of that reinforcement on the backside. Once I'm done doing everything in Blender and thickening it, I bring it back in here, I convert it into that solid model, and then I section it up into 300 by 300 blocks that will fit inside of the K2 Plus. I leave a little bit of extra room for brims and supports and things like that. So you can see here, I just start sectioning everything up, and then I export it as an STL and go over to the printer and print everything out. And then we get into the assembly process of plastic welding everything together. So let's take a look at that real quick. Now that everything has been printed out, we need to move on to the assembly process. So I have a little table set up here in my office, and I've got this driver side pretty much knocked out. You can see where all the join lines are. And what's going on here is I take a panel and I grab some painter's tape and I tape it on the outside of the fender, and I leave this inside exposed here. And then I take a regular soldering iron with a regular tip, and the temperature's cranked up pretty high, and I run that soldering tip along the seam lines, and that leaves this little crevice or trough, but it also bonds it at the same time about halfway through the material. And then I come back with some of the leftover filament on the brims and things like that that I removed and the support material, and I use that to fill in all those crevices. And what you end up with is something like that. And it's dirty on the inside, but it holds really well, and it leaves the outside nice and clean so that later we can go back and epoxy it. So let me show you what that looks like real quick. I'm gonna get this taped up and then we'll run the soldering iron on it. Okay, everything is all taped up now. It's on the outside underneath. You can't really see it, but I might be able to flip it over here in a minute. And I've got a little bit of warping on this panel, and clearly we had some issues. I probably should have supported this a little bit better because I cut this section out, and I guess while it's printing vertically, when it gets to the top, it gets a little wobbly and it kind of messes with the print a little bit. And obviously, like I said, we got some warping up in here. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna start kind of at our edges here where things meet up, and we're gonna run the soldering iron a little bit, kind of like tack welding in a couple different places, and kind of force this back in place where it needs to be along this seam, because it's kind of domed up right there. And then we'll work our way around, like I said, tacking it, and then we'll kind of go over the whole thing again, make a big old trough, and then we'll start filling it in with that material. There it is, all nice and soldered together, if you will. And you can see the little trough that I'm talking about. And this material is only about 3 millimeters thick, so I'm only pushing through about halfway, about 1.5 millimeters. I don't want to push through to the other side. You get bubbles and things like that, but if that happens, no big deal. We are going to have to sand and epoxy and sand and epoxy and sand and primer and all that. So there's definitely a lot of body work left to do on this. But now I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna take some of my leftover brim material and fill in those troughs and kind of bond the panels together with the soldering iron. And there you have it. That panel is soldered in there, plastic welded, whatever you want to call it. It did kind of poke up a little bit in this area. There's a bump from like the edge all the way to about here. But like I said, there's going to be a lot of body work involved in all of this. This is almost like starting from foam, except it's not quite as messy, and I get the shape that I want a lot easier, and everything being done on the computer makes everything go much faster in terms of like prototyping and design. And I think this is going to be a really good start to the body kit. So let's go back out to the garage and see what this looks like on the car. Okay, so first things first, this was one that I had done out of PLA. And why did I do it out of PLA? Well, I had PLA, so that's what I used. And also this was just meant to be a prototype for fit checking and whatnot, to make sure everything was gonna work. Just because you can create something on the computer and in CAD does not necessarily mean it's going to work in real life. That being said, I had to do an alternator on a friend's car, so I put this prototype in the back of the car and then pulled the car out onto the driveway. and I left it out there for, I don't know, like 3-4 hours, but it was like 70 degrees here, and I didn't think it was gonna be an issue. And when I pulled the car back in, that whole thing had just kind of softened and warped and then stayed in that position. So you can see that like that whole thing is just kind of caved in right there. That was kind of heartbreaking because I had not even had the chance to put it on the car and see if things were going to work out. But that's a good lesson, you know, keep things inside, even if they're prototypes, because things are going to warp in the sun or in any sort of minor heat outside. Just don't do it, you know, take care of the things that you make, and hopefully this won't happen to you. So anyways, moving on to PETG, ordered a bunch of that stuff, did all my prints, and here is what we are looking like on the car. Check that out. I think it's going to work okay. There's a few questionable areas in this part of the fender here where it kind of curves up. I am not sure if that wheel is going to hit when the suspension compresses. The suspension should tilt inwards towards the top of the tire upon compression, and so hopefully we don't end up hitting the inside of that fender. And if we do, it's gonna take me at least a couple hours to kind of pull the fender out a little bit further, or maybe just pull that curve out a little bit further so that when the wheel goes up, it doesn't collide with the fender. But that is the whole point of prototyping. If it works like this, then we can just use the prototype the way it is and continue on with epoxy and fiberglass or carbon fiber backing, whatever we're gonna do to it. The main thing I need to figure out right now is how to mount those fenders. I want to make sure they are removable. And in the original Shoguns, they pop riveted those fenders on there and then they fiberglassed everything in, and they are not removable. But I want mine to be removable just in case something happens to the fender, we get in an accident, I hit something, whatever. I can just print out another 3D part, do the whole process and the bodywork for it, and then pop it back on there. So what I'm probably going to do is look into using some of those tabs with those rivets, those riv nuts that are in there, and weld them onto the side of the fender here. And we have access from the front and from the back over here where I can reach in and screw the fender on. And of course we have access from the bottom. And when I cut a hole out in there so that air can come in the front, I should have access from the inside of the vehicle. We can make some angles and plastic weld them onto the inside of the fender, and then those will get kind of incorporated when we do the inside bonding of the carbon fiber or whatever. So everything will get held together. So right now, everything's held on with tape, but the concept is there and everything fits pretty good. The front fenders are actually on the car and they are mounted because those fenders are removable from the factory. So those were a little bit easier to do. Now those are actually made out of PLA, and they held up to a trip or two out to the car shows in the morning over at Estate Coffee. And well, this one here is kind of splitting a little bit at that seam. I've kind of developed the method a little bit better for getting things plastic welded together. But nonetheless, these front fenders are definitely gonna have to get reprinted, but out of PETG, providing that the process on the rears works out just fine. All in all though, this is coming together really, really well. I still need to do the side skirts to connect the front to the back. And then of course we still have to do the front bumper and the rear bumper. So there's a lot more computer work left for me to do. And that's okay, because that's relatively free. All it really costs me is time and the tiniest bit of electricity. And I get to hone my skills in Fusion 360 and mesh modeling. So I'm gonna continue developing the body kit, finishing everything up, and then figuring out how to mount everything. And once that's done, we'll bring that in on the next episode and we can start the body work on the car once everything is mounted up. There are a few areas that didn't mirror exactly left to right on the car. So like over here, you can see that I got those profiles really, really good. But when I mirrored the part and printed it out to the other side of the car, well, we got a really big gap in there. The profile's close, but for some reason it's a good like 3/4 of an inch off. So I got to kind of figure that out, and that's probably just due to the flexing of the plastic bumper but we'll figure something out there. The beautiful thing about this though, like I said, is that everything can just be mirrored. So I don't have to worry about one side of the car being different from the other and trying to take exact measurements and make everything symmetrical from side to side. All I have to do is click mirror, the part mirrors itself, and then print it out, and it's just kind of the same, which is great. So that is currently where we are at with the car right now. This is about all I can really afford to do right now, and luckily filament is relatively cheap, but yeah, we're making progress and everything's looking pretty good. The wheels and the tires have made the biggest difference on the car out of everything. The suspension's kind of right where it needs to be. The front needs to come down a little lower, but we'll get to that later. I can actually hammer this thing on the highway and spin the tires a little bit and haul butt in this thing without having to worry about torque steer or anything else that was kind of plaguing me before. I really think the width of the tires and the actual good tires instead of those really cheap discount tires made the biggest difference. The car is sitting right where it needs to be and it handles like a dream. It is fantastic to drive. And I cannot wait to get the rest of the body kit finished up so that we can start making it look like it's supposed to look. But with that being said, I'm gonna end the episode here. I'm gonna go back inside and continue working on the design of everything like I said I was gonna do. And then hopefully on the next episode, we'll have the rest of everything printed out and we'll have a really good look at what the car is gonna look like with everything kind of mounted on it, and we can get started on my favorite thing in the world, bodywork. I do not like bodywork, but we'll get into that and we'll make a mess when the time comes. And as soon as we can afford more materials, we'll get that done. A huge thank you to everybody that's been out at the car meets, that scanned the QR code and joined and subscribed to the YouTube channel, to the guys on the 3D printed car parts group that saw the post. I got like 2,000 likes on that post and enough subscribers to push me over the 1,000 subscriber mark. And everybody that's been following since the beginning, I just can't thank you enough. I really do appreciate the support. I don't know, it just feels really, really good. That dopamine rush is just like, I hit 1,000 subscribers. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And then I think the next goal is what, 10,000 subscribers? I don't know. We'll see if we can hit that. I'll just be optimistic and say we'll get there eventually, maybe in a couple years, but we'll see. I've been reading all the comments on YouTube and on Facebook, and let's continue the conversation. Maybe you have a better way of doing things or something I didn't think about, and something more affordable or something more practical. I don't know, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the project. Let me know what you think of the progress and what's been going on in these episodes. And if there's something specific that you want to see or something explained that I didn't talk about during the episode. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Y'all take care. Have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.